I'm Eric Sheppard, and this is Regarding Music. I'm here with Daix Ai, who's a composer, pianist, and music teacher. Dax, thank you so much for coming on Regarding Music. I'm really looking forward to our discussion here today.
Glad to be here, Eric. Thanks for having me.
So, before we dive in here, why don't you take a second to introduce yourself and talk a bit about the work you do?
Sure. My name is Daix Ai, or you can call me Dax. I'm mainly a composer, but I was raised as a concert pianist. I am finishing a doctoral degree in music composition and theory at Indiana School, Jacob School of Music in Indiana Bloomington. I teach theory, composition, and I collaborate with large ensembles, chamber ensembles, and individual artists.
Amazing. So, before we get too far into it, why don't we talk a bit about your compositional style, the type of stuff you like to write, major influences? What sort of music do you write?
So I have a very strong classical background. I grew up in the classical style when I was, in my mother's belly. She really believed that by playing Mozart and Bach to me before I was born, I would grow up, become smarter. But that turned me into a classical musician, which my parents at first was really not happy about my career choice. But
Okay.
my mom had to take the blame for that. She got me hooked to Mozart when I was before I was born. So a lot of my major influences are from kind of the Western classical canon. I love my golden era was the 20th century, early 20th century French music. I love
Nice.
Debussy, Ravel. I can bath in those music forever and ever. Another side of me, though, so I grew up in China. I
Oh,
came
cool.
here as an exchange student when I was 14. So all my childhood I spent in China. I grew up in the province of Hunan, which is kind of like an educational and a cultural center. So I was heavily influenced by traditional Chinese music, traditional Chinese operas, and I've played erhu, which was kind of like a two-string Chinese string instruments. And it's interesting to find intersections between those two worlds in my composition.
Right, sort of finding ways to bridge it, whilst maintaining those sort of classical influences.
Exactly.
So, what have you found? Because one of the things that I've found I guess I've probably spent a bit less time in school than you from the sounds of it, but one of the things that I found in music school composition courses was like a lot of the music that I would like to write, which is I'm a choir guy. I'm deeply passionate about church choir and writing stuff for parish choirs, which the main bottom line of what you want to do with a lot of that sort of music is like approachable stuff, more simple stuff. And I found when I was in university, they'd be like, okay, well, how can you go and make that like post tonal? How have you found sort of balancing some of those interests in the more early 20th century with this sort of inevitable push to write more sort of postmodern stuff, or have you even found that?
I think so. I only started composing when I was in undergrad, actually, towards the midpoint of my undergrad. So I was kind of like a latecomer.
Yeah.
I think this kind of like relationship with more complex or like modern avant-garde music for everyone is like a push and pull relationship. So I started with really going against it because I was so classically trained. I considered Prokofiev as the epitome of modernism,
Yeah.
which was like almost 100 years ago at this point. Um, but then I moved as I was getting more composition training in the conservatory. I was doctrinated into thinking, oh, 12 tone is cool, and then you have to like use all those like complex techniques to almost like prove yourself. And I did
Yeah.
that for a few years. I've had some pieces that are like really avant-garde and very abstract. If someone want to play them, that's great. I don't ever want to hear them again. Um, and then as I was like, planning my career out of school, I started realizing what got me into music was that like raw and sincere emotional connection with orchestral music that Ravel, Debussy had wrote. That the first time I went into a concert hall listening to like Beethoven, that um excitement of just music, not knowing anything about
Yeah.
it. And so I started thinking, maybe I should start creating music that is not just intellectually stimulating, but actually connect on an emotional level with musicians, but also with people who know very little about music.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really interesting things to unpack there. But one of the things that I've found with, composing for different audiences, if you will, it's like the stuff that you would write to get a good mark in a composition class isn't the same as the stuff that I would write to give to, like, a music director at a church, right? It's not the same. And then a lot of that stuff is not the same as the stuff that I found to, like, perform well on social media,
Hmm.
right? I found that those are like three sort of different things. It's like if I came in here with like a bunch of 12-tone post-tonal stuff, like it would not get the same amount of views. At least I've found. As if I come in with like the Sibelius or like AI choir stuff.
I feel like if you do like classical music, you could find like a very specific niche of
Hmm.
people who appreciate it on Instagram. But so I for me it's whatever you feel it's most like authentically you
Yeah.
is what you should do and what brings you the most joy. Because I had this conversation with my piano teacher Emil Namov during my masters. We're talking about 12-tone music, and he said he had a student once who would be brought to tears every time playing Schoenberg and the Berg. And that I could not fathom that, because for me, especially Berg, I have
Yeah.
no emotional connection to that music whatsoever. But for some people, that is their bread and butter. It's just not me.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's funny. I was thinking, I know some people who've said they've been brought to tears by Schoenberg and Berg, but a different kind, but a different kind of tears. But yeah, it's. I think that that's one of the difficult things, though. About finding, okay, what is it that I am about, and it is a push and pull. I really agree with what you said earlier about it being a push and pull, and that I feel like as a student it's really important to go out there and see what is out there and to try those different things. But at the end of the day, you have to do the things that you want. And I think that that to me is one of the differences between being, a student and then just being, a musician kind of out in the world. And it's something that I've thought a lot about and talked a lot about with people on this pod about, conducting. And I think it's relevant for composition as well. At what point do you say you're a conductor, right? Are you studying to be a conductor or are you a conductor, right? And, we do a lot of, education studying, but at what point are you going to say, I'm just a musician and this is just what I do? And I'm interested in your thoughts on that idea from a composition perspective.
Yeah, I personally think labels, we give too much importance to labels than we think. Like
Yeah.
anyone can just go on internet and call themselves a conductor or composer, right?
Yeah.
And I am not against that. I feel like if a composer or a conductor is something you want to be, put that on your bio, see how it feels, see if it
Yeah.
feels authentic, call yourself a composer. Like I mentioned before we started recording, I'm in the transition of like changing my name. So I was always known as Daix Ai, and I wanted to try out the shortened name, which is Dax. I couldn't decide if it was a good idea, but my mentor told me just try it out.
Give
Like,
it a go.
yeah, introduce to some people, introduce yourself as Dax and see how it feels. And I think we will never have the right answer unless we live and experience it. And there's no harm of wearing some pants, finding out that they don't fit you, and then abandon it later.
Yeah, I totally agree that I think that, saying that you're the thing helps you do the thing,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Coming out here and biting off more than you can chew a little bit and being like, this is what, not what I want to do, but this is just what I'm doing.
Exactly.
It's a difficult balance, and I feel like coming, especially from the sort of university setting where it's like, it's really easy to feel like you need to preface with, I'm studying X before I, do the thing.
Yeah.
It's really easy, and I felt like with conducting stuff, less so with composition, because a lot of my like composition stuff happened outside of school and more like, in the church. Which is like not what happens with most people. Like I got like, I guess blessed with like, a choir that wanted to like do my compositions when I was in high school.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So yeah, which it's one of those, I guess a really another major topic that we can segue into is, getting performances, because, getting projects done in school and actually like getting groups to do your work is like not the same thing at all. What would you say has been your like best or most interesting, most exciting performance opportunity that you've gotten so far?
I always think my current opportunity is the most exciting.
Hmm.
Um, I like living the moment, and when I'm like invested in a project, I'm just so involved with it. Like I would be driving back home, thinking about what I'm writing and what I've almost gotten into car accidents before. So currently, I just finished an orchestra piece for the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, and
Cool.
it's commissioned by a foundation called the Sing Me a Story. So they take stories written by children in need and turn them into musical pieces. So I was paired with a 7-year-old cancer survivor from
Wow.
Indianapolis, and she wrote this wonderful, magical beach adventure, which I turned into a orchestra piece, and that's going to be performed this month. So I'm super excited to hear. I want to know the kids' reaction to hearing her story being brought to life, and I love storytelling as a way of composing, and that's like my bread
Yeah.
and butter. And I'm just super excited to present her story to more audience.
Amazing. No, it's always a good thing when you can find a way to give other people a voice with your music. I mean,
Yeah,
that's something that I mean, I to be quite honest haven't done. Most of the stuff that I do is for, parish choir or for the internet. But yeah, no, that I think that's incredible. What, I guess, ideas or thoughts or advice do you have for other composers who are trying to get their work performed?
I think that is, the biggest questions for all the composers. I guess like my biggest advice at this point is to just be open-minded. I think, well, I am just finishing my doctoral after being in school for like 11 years straight. And I always felt like there's kind of like a model, like a career trajectory for composers. So
Yeah.
you go to festivals, you spend tens and thousands of dollars on those programs, you write music for free, you write for concerts in school, and you either get a job as a composition faculty somewhere, or you get like residency. And those two positions are like very rare, and there are a lot of competitions too.
Yeah.
But what I find is I am getting more out of my time, my creativity, and also getting more connections by just, going on social media, talking to random people, or like um just working with performers without like expecting any like major commissions coming out of it.
Yeah.
I think, well, I was raised as an only child, and it was only in recent years that I started shifting from the mindset of that I'm the star, that I have to be the best in my field, I have to be the next John Adams in new music, to we are all just fish in a very big pond, and we're trying to do like little things that will add up to a big sum at some point. And it's okay to, take smaller projects and build relationships and to take one step at a time.
Yeah, it's one of those things that one of the biggest things that I guess I've learned from talking to other musicians on this pod is that like, if you can just like, you know, get a career as a musician doing the thing that you're interested in,
Yep.
that's a win. Right? That's a win. And, I used to think that, there was a time where I was like, I'll go to school and become a music prof, which I didn't do. And that was in part because I kind of realized and learned it's like, you could find a way to do the stuff that you're actually interested in without, being a prof necessarily. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Like, do you think it's if you just think of yourself as a business and network and do the right things, like, do you think it's possible to develop a career as a composer without sort of that university basis, kind of like, without that university position sort of under your feet?
I'm biased because I have spent so much time in.
Yeah, yeah,
I have gotten a lot of opportunities from my connection within the higher education, and I was also very fortunate to go to prestigious music schools, getting
yeah.
very good and a solid training. I think everyone who wants to become like a serious musician, whether you're thinking of performing, conducting, or composing, you have to go through the rigorous training. But just you have to keep in mind and in perspective that music school is not going to offer you everything.
Yeah.
It's not going to hand you a successful music career on, a plate. Um, and there are a lot of things you have to pick up outside of school. So I think having a combination of like a rigorous conservatory training and a real life experience would be like the best package deal for developing a music career. Because at the end of the day, I think every musician should have their craft. All the business, social media, promotion aside,
Yeah.
you have to know what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of those interesting sort of other push and pull things
Yeah.
that that it's obviously you need to have like the goods. Like, yeah, you need to do good work at whatever it is you do musically. But the fact is, if you just did good work, I don't think doing good work on its own is enough.
No.
You need to have those business skills, those networking skills. And honestly, I'm interested in your take on this because you're active on social media as a composer. Is that like I've found like I've gotten so many opportunities just from like getting better at social media and putting yourself out there in such a way that it's like if I just did the same compositional work on my own in my basement or as part of a course like that I wouldn't have gotten. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And like I can say that because I've been on like both end of the spectrum. So
Yeah.
undergrad, when I first started composing and taking piano performance seriously, I was a lone wolf. I had like no friends, and it was very pathetic. I was very stressed and depressed and lonely. But I practiced a lot. I did a lot of ear training. I composed a lot, and that provided me the foundation to then move on to do more things. But having experienced that type of isolation, I know it doesn't work. It keeps you out of contact of the cultural fabric, the
Yeah.
society that you live in. We don't, as much as I want to take all my music inspiration just from dead people's music, that is not inspiring, nor is it like commercially viable. I need to talk to living performers and composers to get more sources of inspiration. So I think um, and the social media is a great way to just like engage with people, rarely at like a low level of effort. But like once you start just talking to more people and engaging in like I hate the word networking, but like
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
what it is. I think I also realized that people are a lot nicer than I thought.
100%.
Like you could just like ask people for like I'm not saying everyone should do this, and there are a lot of people who, charge money for a consultation. But I have just like cold emailed or cold DM people and be like, "Hey, I really love your work. I'm trying to do the same thing. Could we have a meeting and just chat?"
Oh, 100%.
I have had a lot of luck, which like always shocked me that people are just willing to like give up their free time. But then if you think about it, those successful people, they have had a lot of help in the past as well. And they're
Yeah.
trying to like give back as much as they can.
No, 100%. I've found the same thing that there's absolutely, amongst people who you kind of would want to emulate, I guess.
Yeah.
Definitely there's a kind of pay it forward culture and attitude amongst a lot of musicians where, I've found like most of the people I have on the pod, and this is how we met. It's just like, hey, it looks like you're doing interesting work. Do you want to come on and have a conversation? And most people are usually game for that. Most people are usually like, okay, I'm interested in connecting and learning about what you do. Because ultimately, musicians who are putting themselves out there on the internet are probably, they're usually interested and passionate about it,
Mhm.
and are happy to talk about their work and share their ideas with other people. So I found the same thing that, other musicians have been, usually pretty approachable.
Yeah.
But have you found, and it's interesting because I found that usually, like, reaching out to other musicians to collaborate is really easy. But, have you gotten any, like, haters at all before on music stuff? Because I feel like putting your music out there into the world, is a really personal thing. And I could see it. It's like if someone disagrees with a take that I have on the podcast, for example, I probably, like, would not care. Most, like, nine out of 10 of the times I'd be like, okay, like, whatever. But
Yeah.
if someone's like, I didn't like your piece, that's like,
It-
a knife through the heart type of thing. I don't know, like, what have you found?
Yeah, and especially for composers, I think to some degree for performers, because once performers, I was a pianist, I understand once you have an interpretation of a piece and someone don't like the way you play it, it's like they're stabbing your baby.
Yeah.
And, and that like and I don't think that kind of fear or like feeling of like hurt when people criticize the art you pour your heart into, that like heartbroken feeling is bad. That just
Mm,
means you really, really care about what you do. If anything, I would take that as, a compliment to myself because I really cared and I put a lot into it,
yeah.
as much as it hurts. Um, I've gotten better at taking criticisms, and I separate the criticisms into two parts. The first part is the constructive criticisms. Those are usually from people that genuinely want to make me be better. And those are some people who might have given me like a criticism, but then I follow up with questions like, oh, how can I make this better? And they actually turn around, become my mentor. And we started having like a relationship that's helpful for me to
Yeah.
grow. And there's another camp that are people who are just like pros or haters. And
Drinking the haterade out here, yeah.
yeah, they just like they probably have a miserable life and they want to make someone else miserable.
Oh,
And
yes.
the way I spot those people is if you follow up with the same question. So you don't like my piece. Um, how can I make this better? They usually don't have an answer for you because they're not thinking for your benefit. They're just trying to make your day bad, and I
Yeah.
usually just disregard those. So my like kind of rule of thumb at this point is if someone gave me a criticism and they can tell me how to improve it,
Yeah.
I will take that with a very
And
humble
I
heart.
also feel like the medium over which that happens, it's like,
Yeah,
if you put work out there and someone's like genuinely interested in, like, hey, like, I like your work, I'd love to give you some feedback on it. They're not leaving a shitty comment, like they're DMing
right.
you,
No, they're
right?
usually nice, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But no, it's one of those things that I feel like so many musicians. I felt this. It sounds like you have. There's gonna be that fear of putting your work out there. It's like, oh man, like
yeah,
what if someone doesn't like it? But the fact of the matter is like I found at least when that happens, I just like didn't care. I was just like, what does that guy know? Like,
yeah.
whatever. Like,
Another strategy, yes, I have definitely felt like even till this days. I just had a score published on Score Follower, and I
oh,
got
nice.
anxious checking it out because it was written in response to a hate crime, and it's not pretty music.
Yeah,
But one strategy I have developed to kind of shield myself is to have, if I have like a controversial work that I know I might get some haters or people don't appreciate it, I have to know why I did it. I have to have a very solid and strong reason to back up my
yeah.
the style that I invested in and my reasoning behind what I put on the page.
Yeah, and I think that it's good to know that going in,
Right.
obviously, but yeah, it's one of those things like I find when because it's funny, I usually get really good feedback on just like, random sort of sound bites that I share. But the thing that seems to be like the controversial wedge issue is like I do AI choral music. So like I'll get AI to make a demo of it, and like the number of people who are like AI shouldn't be in music. What? Like, is actually kind of hilarious. But I was like, I'm just out here being like, yes, I'm relevant. People are, I'm starting a conversation.
Yeah. That's
you know?
another thing, um, I've heard a lot of influencers say when you start getting haters, that's when you know you're doing the good work because people are responding, you're
Yeah,
getting attention.
it's good for the algorithm.
Yeah, exactly. And I understand people who don't like appreciate AI, especially in music at this point, but
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate you doing the work and striking the conversation at Indiana University. Actually, like this March, we have an AI summit where they spent like days just talking about
Really.
AI technologies, where it's going, and doing like demo projects. So I think it's relevant, despite like whether people like it or not. It's happening.
Oh yeah, and it's one of those things that put it this way, like the AI choir stuff, it's obviously like not as good as if you did it with a regular choir, but it's
Right.
I'd say as good as if you did it with like Sibelius playback type of thing, but you have text. So I'd say it's one of those things that it's like good enough to make demos, but it's not good enough to be like convincing that that was an actual choir. Like that it's a digitally rendered thing, but I still think there's value in it, and it's also just like silly.
It's
But
something new to look at and something new to explore.
yeah, so getting kind of back to sort of the university music area, what advice ideas do you have for maybe people who are in their undergrad and are considering pursuing either a major or a master's in composition?
That's a good question. And I'm sure I'll have a completely different answer if you ask me like 5 years from now
Yeah.
after spend time
It's
out.
always the way.
Yeah. I always tell people if you can take gap years, at least take gap years between undergrad and masters. And this just like logistically thinking, going through all three degrees, so undergrad, master,
Yeah.
doctorate, it's a lot. And at the end, you're going to be so jaded and you will hate school. And that's not. But I have heard people saying if you take too much time between masters and a doctorate, it's really hard to get back and get a doctorate because masters is relatively short program, but doctorate is heavy loads of work, and then you have to do exams and dissertations. Don't It's hard to get a doctorate when you're in your like 30s and 40s and you have a life already, and at that point,
Yeah.
like, why am I doing this? But I am starting to question the necessity of getting like a doctorate at this point because and I've heard a lot of different opinions. So the traditional way of thinking is you have to have a doctorate in composition and a theory if you ever want to teach.
Hmm.
And those were said a lot by older faculty because the time period they kind of grew up in, they could have a job at the end of their degree. So once you
Right.
go through 10 years of school, your career is set. You have a good paying salary, you have a tenure track position in higher education. But that is not the case anymore. I
No.
am not even thinking about applying to a higher ed job like
Really.
after I graduate, at least like not next year or the next few years. Um,
Why is that? Is it just more competitive, fewer like more people and fewer jobs, or like what do you think is the driver of that?
there's just less and less job openings available, and more people now have access to higher ed. And the amount of people that hold like a PhD or DMA degree in music have like risen like
Right.
sharply.
It's like the degree inflation.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone has a degree now.
Yeah, I remember. So I guess for background on me, I did 2 years of music school at undergrad and 2 years at business school, and got a business degree. And I could have done a fifth year. I could have done a fifth year to get my music degree as well, but I graduated in 2020. So I was like, I could do remote lessons or I could do like tech jobs remotely. So
Right.
I went the business route, and then I went back to music school.
Yeah.
For some time, and was considering, pursuing a career in music academia. And I remember one of my profs, who was a composition prof, told me just that. He was like, you're gonna go and get a doctoral, and there will be like one job. I'm Canadian. He's like, there will be one job in Canada a year type of thing, and like 50 qualified people applying for it. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't sound economical at all.
Yeah, no, it's just I don't know why the academic, especially like music school, the landscape of academic job market has changed so much. But
Yeah,
I think that's also why I would love to see more new hires in higher education. I would like to see more professors who are in their early 30s, late 20s even, because they are more close to the current market. They know what's
right.
going on. You can cut that out if I cannot curse on this.
No,
Right?
that's fine. I don't care.
They don't know what's going on. The clean version. And second, that also give opportunities to younger people to come into higher education, get hired by them, and not just like freaking out about not being able to find a job
Yeah.
afterwards.
Well, I do think though that it's probably not been easier to go your own way as a composer as it is now, in a really, really long time, probably, because you've got things like being a content creator, doing social media, doing podcasts, doing, becoming a business, around your work and ideas. And, I was talking with someone, offline about this a few days ago, is that like, as much as people will say, okay, I'm a church musician, right? Like, people will often say, oh man, like it must have been so much better to be a church musician, 50 or 60 years ago when there were more jobs and more, congregations. It was like a more in-demand skill. But the fact is like, if you can find a way to take those skills and that art, you know, in a virtual and online setting, in some ways it probably is better than maybe 20 or 30 years ago, because you can go and, create a niche and create a business for yourself in a way that 50 or 60 years ago, if you were going to be a composer, you kind of only really had that academic route. Whereas now it's harder to go that route, but there are other things you can do.
Exactly. And that's going back to like what I said maybe 30 minutes ago, like having like an open mind. Again, I think like traditionally conservatory trained composers have this very like stiff model of what a composer should be.
Yeah.
But a lot of the most successful people who had a composition degree, they do things that are like connected to their skills as a composer, but not like exactly what they envision as a student.
Yeah.
I met the I think this like radio host. He has like millions of followers, and he said, he got into radio because he was a composer who couldn't produce enough work. But then he, started doing like a radio show, and he would have to crank out music and crank out production every week, and that really got him working. So,
Yeah.
like, I think your career sometimes will not look like what you envisioned, and just like be flexible.
No, I think that's a really interesting parallel with the story you just told, because I totally relate to that. It's like, I'm probably writing more music now than I ever have,
Yeah.
but I'm putting it on my Instagram and talking about it on the pod. Like, it's not getting published kind of thing. Like, it's not like, oh, I need to find a choir or an orchestra to do this. It's like, no, I'm gonna write this thing and I'll be able to make 6 reels off of it.
Right.
Type of thing, right? Which is, I don't think that's ever been a dynamic before, but like before kind of our period. But
Hmm.
it kind of creates a new medium and a new reason to write music, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think it's whatever keeps you going, whatever keeps you writing every day, it's what you should do, whether that is writing for social media, writing for your friends, writing for your family. But
Yeah.
I think the key is to just keep going
Yeah.
and don't stop.
So what ideas do you have for people who get kind of getting back to that academia area, for people who are doing composition auditions or putting together portfolios? Because I could see that being a major thing that's on people's minds who are kind of
Yeah.
in that space.
It's wild because performers, they have like they do mock auditions. They
Yeah.
prepare all the time for those like big moments that could determine their fate. But like we don't do the same for composers. So I'm actually working on a blog post for IU comp department talking about composition audition prep, just because I think those kind of information need to be out there.
Yeah.
So definitely I will link that on my Instagram when it's available. Uh, but for now, I think so. There are two parts to the auditions. There's the pre-screening where you send in your portfolio, your scores, and your midis, and there's the live audition round where you actually get to talk to the people. And live audition for composers are different than for performers because
Yeah.
it's an interview. We call it audition. It's more like an interview. And I'll give one tip for each category.
Yeah.
So for the pre-screening, I think for the pre-screening, it's all about your music. So make sure you have high quality audio, especially video recordings. If they ask for videos, sending videos. And that is one thing like I would actually spend time and a resource on getting like a high quality, professionally done video recording is going to elevate your music a lot more. And make sure your scores are professionally engraved. Send it to your friends, to professionals you know, to proofread them for you, make
Yeah.
sure they're publisher ready. And for the live audition, there's so much I can say about live auditioning. That's like another thing that's just kind of like, human relationship. You're going in,
Yeah.
just talking to people. I would be authentic. I would just go and ask who you are. Try not to like upsell or downsell yourself, but present just the most authentic you. And I know it's hard to do this because it's hard to do it myself, but try to think of what is like special about you. Everyone has something that is so special about them that it cannot ever be replicated by another person. And to try to like highlight on that.
Yeah, and it's really interesting you say that because I think that, being a composer who also does social media, internet stuff, that's almost practice for that, right?
Right.
Being able to tell your story and talk about your work, not just in a way that is correct, but in a way that is like interesting and compelling,
Yep.
is such a powerful thing.
It's
And
all
it's a
about
really interesting sort of parallel here.
Yeah, it's all about packaging. And the last thing I'll say is so once you present your most authentic self, you tell them what's special about you, and then just like let it go. I delete all of my like application confirmation emails. I don't want to think about them because if they reject you, that means it's just not a good fit. It's nothing personal. They
Yeah.
don't hate you, but you're just not what they're looking for in the moment, or they're looking for something very specific and that was in another person's portfolio. But you could never lose by presenting your authentic self. If it works out, it's going to be a great fit with your collaborator or the institution you're going in. But if they reject you, just don't take it too hard.
Just move on.
Yeah, you might have been miserable if you were accepted anyway.
Yeah. Well, Dax, this has been a great discussion. Before we wrap things up here, what thoughts, ideas, piece of advice do you want to leave the listeners of Regarding Music with? I'm giving you the last word.
That is last word. Okay. Keep going. I think the biggest, the most valuable characteristic a musician can have is resilience. Don't let anyone tell you no and you can't do that. You have to prove them wrong, no matter how many years that might take. But just keep doing what you do, and hopefully a lot more people are going to appreciate down the road. But if you don't walk through that road, you will never know.
Amazing. Dax, thank you so much for coming on Regarding Music. It's been a great discussion and a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.